Crosstalk, the unintentional transfer of signals between communication channels, a casual conversation.
Hello world, this is Video Game Crosstalk, episode 019, the monthly podcast of gamers talking tech, science, and whatever else comes to mind. I'm your host, Anthony Rossi, and with me this week is the host of Behind the Line Radio, Kynetyk. Kynetyk, thank you so much for lowering your standards and joining me on this podcast.
Thanks for having me here, man. I also got to say, I appreciate you starting with a 0 that gives you plenty of room to get 3 digits in a numerical order.
Oh, absolutely. And because obviously, since I'm putting these out once a month, I'm definitely going to be going through, I don't even feel like doing the math on how many years it'll take me to get to episode 100.
Somewhere around 8.
Yeah, we'll get there. We're working on. Maybe I'll throw a few extra episodes in there. Who knows? Maybe I'll get back up to either doing a bi-weekly or who knows? Maybe this podcast thing will just take off. I'll be able to quit my day job and just pump out podcasts, whenever I feel like it. Kind of do the Chris Hardwick thing, put out like one a day with his Nerdist stuff. But anyway, so we got Kynetyk here. You are also with the Enthusiacs, shall I call it collective, online community?
Group? Something.
The thing that does the thing. Yeah, other listeners will know a few episodes back, I actually had Judge Greg on, and he's just a little social butterfly on the internets. Yeah, and you reached out to me.
Greg's actually the one that got me involved in all of this.
Is he?
Yeah, I know him. We were friends from college, and one point I went out to the East Coast for business and took the opportunity to visit him. And he mentioned, "Hey, I do this thing. We could do an episode." He does Hero Talk, and Jeff Barenfang does Point Streak, and so they wanted to have me on to talk about video game QA. So I did, and at the same time, when I was out there, he and I watched Dredd, the Carl Urban Judge Dredd movie, and then we did a Hero Talk on that movie. And then I said, "Hey, I'd like to be involved in this," and sort of developed from there. And now I do all kinds of weird stuff for the group.
Nice. It's really interesting. Maybe a few weeks, maybe a month or so ago, I had saw that another one of my previous guests, Ash Lyons, was on another, I think it's just a Gearbox Central podcast. But as soon as he was done with mine, I had him on not too long ago to talk about visual effects in gaming. And I saw him tweet, a few weeks later, like, that was a lot of fun. I would love to be on another podcast. And then a couple weeks later, I saw that he was on, I can't remember the name of the podcast, but it was a Gearbox Central one. And yeah, this is just a lot of fun. As I said before, it doesn't matter if I start making proper income to quit my full day or my full-time gig. This is just a fun hobby to do, to get with other people, reach out and just talk about our fandoms and what's going on in the world.
Yeah, it is. And like, my stuff for Enthusiacs, I don't necessarily even do it to have others be able to hear it. I mean, if other people hear it and they can take stuff from it, that's great. But it's also just something to do. I mean, it's a great way to keep in touch, because I talk with people I've worked with in the industry or had contacts with in the industry. And it helps give me a platform to keep in touch with them and to practice. I mean, one of the reasons I started doing it was to help practice my oration and speaking abilities, and I haven't gone back to compare my first episode with my latest episode, but I am probably a lot smoother in keeping my train of thought together now.
It's I tell a lot of people, public speaking is hard. Public speaking is incredibly difficult. I will very soon, I would have joined already, but the meeting got canceled. My day job office has a chapter of Toastmasters on site where they meet up and do practice speeches and just work on public speaking and presentations. And there's another leadership path that you can follow within that. And this public speaking, and being able to present yourself and communicate ideas in a cohesive and intelligent manner, it's a skill that needs to be practiced and learned and refined. It's not easy. I've joked with some
Yeah.
people, there's a lot of little snippets that I take out trying to clean up all the uhs and ums and stuff like that. So I am fully confident that your public speaking skills have improved just by even casually doing a podcast.
I mean, even like right after I started Twitter pretty late. I'm not much of a social media person. In fact, I'm not much of a social person in general. And what little I do in Twitter is exhausting enough as it is. But early
Other
on
people.
in yeah, pretty much. One of the things I put out there was this GIF from Wallace and Gromit thing where he's riding the train and like rapidly trying to put train track pieces in front of the car he's on. And I said, that's pretty much like my brain when I'm trying to complete a sentence while I'm talking. I'm trying to put all the words in place before my mouth catches up with where my brain is.
Right. And have you ever tried to say two words at the same time?
Probably.
Yes, I definitely have. I asked because I definitely have. And you can't decide which word fits better. Like I just did right there. I was thinking of like a different ending for that sentence, but I had to do a little hesitation as far as what I was going to use to finish that sentence. So yeah, it's pretty much how it works. Oh, anyway, so you mentioned during our intro that you work in QA.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start off with what exactly is QA?
Well, video game QA, I think that perception about this is getting a bit better as time goes on. When I I actually started a long time ago. I started in like real early 2000s.
Okay.
So really, like I've been in video game QA for a really long time, and that's a high churn section of a high churn industry. So a lot of the time, you used to have people who'd be like, "Oh, you get to sit down and play games for a living." And while there's still some of that around, most people understand, okay, this is big enough and complicated enough that that isn't it. And people may not have a fully formed idea of what's going on, but they at least it's less common for people to come in and be like, yeah, I want to sit here and play games. Because what we do is video games don't just spring out fully formed.
Oh, no.
So you're going to have intermediate builds. Those intermediate builds are going to have issues in them, and you need someone to take a look at them and understand what might be going wrong and to report that back so other people can fix it. You know, just kind of.
So really quick, QA, is that quality assurance?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it's quality assurance.
Okay, so it's quality assurance. Is there a difference between, and I've heard these terms somewhat interchangeably, is there any difference between quality assurance and quality control?
I haven't heard the term quality control used much in a video game development setting.
Okay.
So I think it's just a term that isn't used here too much. If I was going to hear quality control, just going by my experience in the industry, I would imagine that that's more along the lines of like managing IP rather than issues with the software.
Okay. So there's definitely a different, from your perspective, based on what you've experienced, there is a slight difference. So we are in quality assurance. So let's take an example of what, say, a ticket item would be, or what path something in QA would entail.
You mean like a bug?
Sure.
Okay. So let's say let's go with something simple. You're in a third-person 3D adventure game on a console, right?
Okay.
And you go into an office, and there's a desk, and you move your character around, and they move up to the desk, and they can walk through the desk. There's no collision detection on this item in the room, and that's not right. You know, is it a huge bug? No, it's not a huge bug, but it's still not right. So you write it up. It would probably be, I don't know, a severity of C or 3, depending on how you're, very noticeable, but it's not game breaking. It's not horrible. You write that up. That would go through whatever assignment channels that are set up in the project, because they're going to be different for pretty much any team.
Oh
or any
God. Okay. Yeah, I
organization.
just have like a horrifying, thought of like if you are working for one particular game developer or company, then you probably get used to however their process is. But now I'm just thinking to myself, what if you're one of the third party or subcontracted smaller studios and you have to bounce between different larger studios, management practices and processes? Oh, good Lord. That can't be fun.
Yeah, it can be a bit tricky with that sometimes. But generally speaking, most of your projects you're going to have people dedicated to a project,
Okay.
so it's not going to be too drastically horrible. And when it comes to most of that'll probably be more to do with idiosyncrasies with how any team wants wording done or formatting,
Hmm.
rather than complications with routing or fields. Because when you're writing a bug, most people are going to have, it's not going to be done through email. You're going to have a bug tracking database like Test Track or Jira or Bugzilla or something like that. And
Bugzilla.
a
That's an
lot of that
awesome
formatting
name.
is going to be set up for you.
Mm.
Which one?
Bugzilla.
Yeah.
That just sounds like a fantastic name for your system. Sorry, I'm distracted by a shiny object. Continue.
But when you're working with that, then okay, you're gonna write it up, send it off. Most of these systems should help with the routing, just to make sure that the people who need to see it, to make sure that the people who need to address it get it. And
Hmm.
then you get to just procedural discipline. Is everyone going to be doing what they need to do? Okay, so the report comes through to the engineer. Hopefully everything's clear. If it's not, maybe they might write back to the tester and say, I don't understand this part. Is it room 101 or is it room 301 or is it room 303 or something like that?
Hmm.
That has this desk without collision detection. Maybe they can't find it. Okay, the tester would explain it, write it back, maybe attach a screenshot or something to the issue to help explain where it is, capture a video or something. I mean, hopefully none of that would be necessary for this example. You should be able to write everything clearly enough that you wouldn't need that level of specificity.
Hmm.
But just
But
as an example
depending
of
on the
something that might be done.
project, and what's going on, I can see where you can only include so much detail in written text without making
Mhm.
a massive correspondence. So yeah, okay.
Then the developer working on it at some point should be able to address it. They say put the collision detection in for this object. And then at a later point, a build of the game would come back to QA. The report would be marked claim fixed or some such equivalent in whatever the workflow of the system is, which
Hmm.
signals that, okay, tester, this bug, we think it's fixed. Try it again and make sure that it's fixed. And you go there, the tester would go in, try to walk into the desk, and let's make it a little more complicated. Let's say, okay, approaching the desk from the front, it now blocks you. But if you walk around the desk and come from the back, you can still walk through it all the way. Like, okay, partially fixed. You send it back. The fix was failed. And you explain that you have to make sure the collision is all the way around the desk. And the process repeats itself until it's completely done. Then there's also
Hmm.
situations where, let me see here. Damn it. I had something and then I lost it. Sorry.
Darn it.
No, it's gone. That's a pretty good
Okay.
example, though.
Okay. Yeah, that's oversimplifying, I'm sure, but the general process I can
Mhm.
imagine would be the same. All right, so that's like the standard process of how it goes. And I could see where in earlier video games, like you said, if you've been in QA since the early 2000s, you're probably of the 90s generation, 90s child. Not born in the 90s, but uh, you've probably gone through the whole playing games on, if we're going to just stick with consoles, the original Nintendo into the Super
Yeah.
Nintendo and Sega Genesis, where, and this isn't to, say that the job was simpler back then, but you're on a 2D platform for the most part. Towards the later end of the generation, we started to dip into either a 3D or I guess what would they call a 2.5 type of perspective. But in today's day and age, not only do you have full blown true three-dimensional movement, but we're getting ever increasingly complex and precise, I guess I'll use, shapes and forms and whatnot. So, like for instance, playing say a GTA, and you're walking around the city, and you walk across the street over to the sidewalk, but you don't quite get to the sidewalk where your character currently stands. Technically, one foot would be on the pavement of the street and the other one would be on the sidewalk, and there is a, in real life, say 6-inch difference or 4-inch difference between the street and the curb. We have now hit the point in development where I have actually seen it programmed in that the leg is bent, and you can see 1 foot on that slight of a different elevation.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine how many different surfaces or zones or however it is programmed to catch every bit of curvature and height differential down to that fine of a degree.
There's actually a name for that. And
Okay.
I might be getting it wrong here, but I think it's inverse kinematics.
Ooh.
There's a
That'll score you points in your SAT.
the extra credits, if you follow them, they had 1 or 2 episodes where they're talking about animations in Shadow of the Colossus. And
Oh boy.
They explained this because the animations in Shadow of the Colossus are astonishing. And the main character, Wander, he's not nimble as a cat. You can stumble, you can jump up and fall down stairs and stuff, but also the horse, Aggro. And in this video, they pointed out that they're standing on a slope, and Aggro's entire posture, like as opposed to, say, Skyrim, where the horse just kind of rotates to go up a slope.
Okay.
Like, Aggro actually has rules that the hooves make contact with the ground at the correct angle for the ground. And then the computer, that's why it's called inverse, from those positions figures out the positions that everything needs to take for this posture to make sense.
Oh, wow.
So in the example of Grand Theft Auto with 1 foot on the curb and 1 foot on the street, so you got to lift up the foot, it says, okay, foot's here. So like the animation isn't just here is a straight animation of running and it's kind of static like that. It's actually dynamic where it says, okay, the foot goes here, and then it traces the anatomy back to say, okay, the foot is up, so the knee has to be a little bit bent, the foot's a little bit forward, and they're on different planes, and they both join at the hip at the right angle and so forth.
That's a lot going on. I'm from the perspective of I just read a lot and play a lot, so I like to think that I know what's going on. Which I think a lot of people on the internet do. But where I try to differentiate myself is to understand that no, I do not know everything. And when you learn little bits like that, I don't know if it's Cunning-Duger effect, but you begin to realize if you get this little piece of information, you can see it extrapolate and spread out into all these other different scenarios and realize, wow, there is so much more going on. Like you kind of realize that you just looked through a pinhole into a very massive area of what it entails or requires to get these just simple walking animations to function properly.
And I'd actually say that goes back to what I was saying about understanding what goes into QA and fixing bugs. And so many times there's an issue that comes up and people say, oh, this should be just a 5-minute fix. And it's like, no, you don't understand. There's all this stacked technology that goes into place that you can't make a change here that doesn't affect things over there. And it's really complicated. It's really tricky. Almost every game, like pretty much every game is going to be some Gordian knot of code and logic.
Yeah, I have one friend who works in IT.
In turn, that's also why when testing a bug, trying to make sure it's fixed, you have to make sure that issues around the fix didn't get broken. Like this fix didn't cause a different problem somewhere else.
Yeah, I think I've seen I think it was a Dilbert cartoon where the IT guy comes in, he fixes one issue with the person's computer. I don't remember if the character's name was Tina or not, if it was that character, but all right, I fixed one issue but broke 2 other things, so I guess I'm ahead of the curve in this situation. Just because exactly what you said. You get one thing to work, but in the vast complex web of interconnected parts and pieces, changing one item then causes completely unexpected and seemingly unrelated things to act in weird ways.
Absolutely.
Like I have one friend who works in IT, and he perpetually mentions how the entire system that he works on is decades old, using different types of code that just aren't in use anymore. Like, oh, this type of code was used heavily in the 70s. But since no one else knows how to code in this language, we're just going to keep this artifact in the system, because otherwise this entire house of cards could tumble and collapse and just cause catastrophic failure across the network.
Legacy. Gotta love it.
Yes.
And by gotta love it, I mean everybody is terrified of it. I mean, there was an old commercial. I always remember this. I don't even remember what it was advertising for, but it was this group of people like in a boardroom talking about stuff, and through the conversation, it becomes clear that they are representative of some like business infrastructure or something. And they're talking about like someone broke in or something happened, and one of them yells out across the hall, "Hey, Legacy, did you leave the back door open?" And there's just this guy in like a bathrobe eating cereal out of a bowl in socks walking down the hallway. Legacy issues, man.
Oh, man. Yeah. Whew. So anything else you'd like to mention about QA before we move on?
Oh, there's always more stuff to talk about QA.
Go for it. You sent me. So in preparing for this show, you sent me a link for the 10 most awkward bugs in gaming history. Yeah. And you have a particular issue with this article. So go ahead with that.
Oh yeah. And it's not necessarily that, and this is something from friggin' Red Bull a couple years ago. I didn't know Red Bull had a games thing, but I was just looking up a few things, and I happened to spot this, and the subtitle for the article was from Faceless, Assassin's Creed Unity characters to GTA 4's swing glitch. Meet the gremlins that made it past QA. And this is another one of those misconceptions that bugs, quote, make it past QA. Okay. Couple things about this. One, you have to realize that it doesn't matter how much time and effort and how smart you are and efficient and effective you are at testing things. That amount of time and effort, if you have any amount of success on release, is going to be immediately dwarfed by the time and effort that people trying to mess with the system have in the public. You know,
yeah. Well, once you release it to the wild, like that's just, I can imagine that people have built up their online identity or YouTube channel by finding bugs and finding ways to break the game.
Oh yeah, and I've watched, what was it, Glitch Fest? I think those are funny. it's great, and it's just so long as everyone is aware, like this doesn't necessarily reflect badly, and you see some glitches that require this really absurd level of detail, or those weird like Super Mario World speed runs where they have to do this absolutely
good God,
insane sequence of events to rewrite binary code into unused RAM memory to skip to the end credits or something. It's weird.
Like, no one's checking for that.
Yeah,
no one's checking for that.
And you're not going to run into it either. Like the level of it's just crazy. But the thing that gets me about this is made it past QA. Okay, a lot of these obvious things, QA saw it. Okay, if you had a competent testing team, they saw it and they reported it, and for any number of reasons, they weren't fixed. They were too difficult. There wasn't enough time. There wasn't enough money. But generally speaking, if you see something wrong, a tester saw it too. And just because it's still in the game doesn't mean the tester didn't see it. QA aren't the ones who fix it. And just because QA finds it doesn't mean it's going to get fixed.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because it comes back to the whole, if we fix this, is something else going to break?
Yeah, and you get to a very precarious thing where you're like, okay, things seem to be stable. We've got these things that happen maybe 1/10 of the time, but every time we've tried to touch it, everything comes crashing down. So, and we have to release in a week. So,
right. And I was just about to say, there's also prioritization going on. Is this a game-breaking bug or glitch?
Yeah.
I think one of them on the list was if you drive through a swing set, your car gets launched into the air. I mean, it's funny, but
Yeah.
it's not necessarily game breaking. And if it's not going to break the game, then outside of just being funny, it's probably not going to be high on the priority list as far as like where to direct your attention,
Yeah.
especially if you've got a release window coming up.
I can give you another example in a released game, which I think is hysterical. Um, in the original Driver, You Are the Wheelman for the PlayStation, I think it is the third stage. If you never move, the Driver, You Are the Wheelman is kind of like a proto GTA in the driving sense.
Okay.
GTA 3 at any rate. Like, I'm one of the weird guys who, when I saw GTA 3, is like, ooh, they went into a 3D world. I'm like, huh, that looks like a Driver ripoff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I start playing GTA 3 and I start like paying attention to traffic signals, and I like pull out a reverse 180 to pull out of a spot. And it's like, how are you doing this? How you do it in Driver? But in this game,
Nice.
a lot of the obstacles are kind of simplistic, like getting pulled over by the cops. They don't shoot you or anything. The police cruisers just ram you until they wreck your car. It's a little weird. But okay, if you on this stage, if you don't move at all, a police cruiser will eventually see you, try to hit you, wreck itself on your car. And maybe there's another, but eventually, like, these wrecks will get out into the street.
Okay.
And then regular traffic will start backing up and smashing into it because the traffic isn't smart enough to go around.
Oh, geez.
And it'll start going down the street and around the corner that goes over a bridge that you can see. And after this goes out of your sight, and this doesn't take too long, like 5-10 minutes or something.
Oh, that's not long at all.
And you look to the right, you see a car careening through the sky and slam into a building across the road.
Yes.
I don't know why that happens, but it's hysterical.
But somehow, with everything else happening, it just culminates into a massive launch of this one vehicle.
Yeah, like maybe it spawns on top of another car and it launches it or something. I have no idea, but I mean, that is clearly a bug. This whole thing is a bug. I mean, really, I would say the bug for this is that the traffic can't navigate its way around stuff, and the car launching its way through the sky is what's known as a bug of a bug, where, okay. Here's the original bug. This other thing that depends on the bug can happen, but would you consider it a valid bug if the first bug were fixed?
Right.
And this is actually a neat little trick in QA to make sure that your issue gets paid attention to is, okay, I found this problem. It's actually just, say, a little hang in the menu or something. But if I can do something to exploit it, I can actually make the game crash. Okay, now you just took a D severity bug to an A because it's now a crash.
Okay. Right. And
so the crash is a bug of a bug, but if you condense it into the original one, then it's still valid and you just made the original bug more severe.
Okay. And I've actually seen some issues with spawning. Actually, there was a few public events in Destiny 2 that I was playing. Last time I played was a couple months ago. I was in this one public event, and these objects spawn onto the battlefield when things start initiating. And my character was just like launched out of the area, just gone. But like nothing hit me. And I think what it was is that one of the items spawned where I was standing, and the system was trying to rectify that whole thing. And rather than having, it glitch out with two objects, my character and whatever the battlefield object was existing in the same space, they must have done something where it just kind of like pushes, like maybe the object just like grows from the inside out to push things out of the way, but the rate at which it pushed me at must have triggered some type of physics control and just said, oh, well, if you're moving this, like acceleration, basically, you move from here to here in this amount of time, therefore you're moving at this rate, and my tune gets flying across half the battlefield. That's like the best that I could figure out, because I'm like getting ready to, coordinate with my team. I'm like, all right, let's do this. Oh my God, why am I 60 feet in the air?
Well, at least it puts you up instead of down through the floor.
Oh yeah, that's and that we can probably go on for hours about this, but like again, Destiny and Destiny 1, there was one strike mission where it was like really impossible to get through just the way that the variables worked down this one strike. And someone somehow, some way found a way to ride your little it's called a Sparrow, which are basically your Star Wars speeder bike. If you're to drive that thing into the air, this one area, and slam it repeatedly into this one nook of a boulder formation on the one side of a hill, it'll eventually somehow glitch through the floor and you'll be able to walk around underneath the ground. Like, I have no idea how someone was able to find that.
Well, I mean, you start looking at speed runs, they take advantage of a lot of those. They're called out of worlds.
Okay.
Yeah, they
Oh, so there's an entire name for these things.
Yeah.
Okay.
They used to be kind of my forte back in my console testing days. I'm on
All right.
mobile now, and they don't exactly come up so much in mobile games. So,
Okay.
but
anyway, yeah, we could go on. Go ahead.
One other thing that I wanted to touch on, though,
Sure.
is you were kind of mentioning earlier about how simple things used to be versus how they are now, and you've been kind of using the 3D world as an example. And honestly, like a 3D world like opens up new venues for issues to occur. Like I said,
Okay.
collision detection, out of world, stuff like that. More complexity with animations. But what
I actually saw
get really difficult
on this. Go ahead.
Well, what really makes things more difficult is the underlying systems. Network technology, is this working correctly? Can you exploit this? Is something going wrong here? It's when the logic underlying thing starts to get complicated that things get weird. And there was a really, really big, bad example of this a few years ago with the Diablo 3 economy. If you recall, there was the bit where they had to take down the auction house because of the
I remember
gold
this
bug. Yeah. And it's not that particular issue was so difficult to reproduce. It had to do with something like the size of the variable they used for a thing.
Oh, wow.
But also, and I was trying to look to find this before we started, but I couldn't quite find where I saw this originally. But I remember reading that one of the issues with that was there was a particular change that went into that update that they didn't even send to QA. Like, yeah, never do that. Never do that. I mean, one of my core tenets for my QA departments is don't trust anybody. Like, if an engineer says this should be fine, check it extra hard. Like, I don't trust him. I don't trust him as far as I can throw him.
Right. There was this one Twitter thread, and I can't remember who posted it. I want to say it was someone from BioWare, but don't quote me on that. He went into some type of detail, some like hypothetical of just a simple death animation for a character in a game. And it had to do with putting into the code what happens when a character reaches 0 hit points. So you reach 0 hit points, the character becomes inactive, but you have to add in a death animation, for him, like keeling over on the ground. But this animation occurs, during the rest of the game while it's still going. And what happens if that animation becomes interrupted by contact from either an opposing player or another enemy? Does that character become reanimated because they're supposed to react to that damage impact? And if they do recover, or if they do respond to a damage impact, do they follow the code to go back into their regular operation? And if they go back into their regular operation, what happens if they have 0 hit points at the time and you can't fall below 0? Does that character then become essentially immortal because during your death animation, another random came in contact with it?
Yeah, or does your animation restart and you can have someone grief you by just keeping on tapping you and forcing you to restart your death animation so it never finishes, so you never respawn or something like that. I recall that one. I don't remember where it's from either.
Yeah, but that kind of puts things into perspective. Even Yeah, it just puts things into perspective of how complicated, how quickly this can become incredibly complicated before too
Uh-huh.
long.
Yeah, those are called event collisions where you have two things happening
Okay.
where the logic doesn't like jibe with each other. They were written with the implicit assumption that they wouldn't interact, but you can
Hmm.
make them interact.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I can actually bring another example of an old school bug from the NES game Blaster Master that kind of
Okay.
works like this, where if you beat a boss of a stage, this jingle plays. And if you pause and unpause the game, the jingle restarts. So if you
Hmm.
keep pausing and unpausing the game, you will never advance. I mean, you're actively causing this and you want to, but it will keep the game stuck, repeating the jingle over and over again.
Oh, oh,
You could
that's
actually also mess with the music while it's doing that, because if you hit it just right, the little MIDI wave synthesizer, whatever
mhm.
it is, starts kind of getting stuck on the wrong note a little bit, just on the bass line. I think it's the square wave.
Okay.
Starts acting weird.
Oh
But
boy.
yeah.
Yeah. So plenty,
Or
plenty of
or
different
sorry,
ways.
another example from Blaster Master, because I love that game.
Okay.
Because you're riding a freaking badass tank that jumps. When you roll the tank, and actually this is a pretty good example because it goes into how QA is also a bit of detective work, because when we're looking at it, sometimes to figure out the cause of the issue, we can write up a thing and the engineer would be like, I don't see anything wrong. But if you look at it deeper, like a detective, and try to understand the underlying system and say, no, this is what's happening. It's doing this. I know how to fix it. And you don't have to say, when you write a bug, you don't be like, you need to fix it this way. You just lay out the logic of what's happening.
Okay.
In this game, you ride the tank, and when you go to the side, it kind of bounces up and down, right? Like you're going off road, right?
Mhm.
And then when you take your finger off the D-pad, it kind of slowly rolls to a stop. It decelerates on its own. It doesn't like stop instantly.
Okay.
So it has a bit of momentum. Interestingly enough, I happen to know that momentum is timed and based off of the bouncing up and down animation. And I
Okay.
know that because if you jump and paw and land, when you land, the wheels kind of jut out to the side a little bit, like it's absorbing the impact. If you
Okay.
pause right at the base of that, and then unpause, it doesn't pop back up into its normal position. It stays really, really low for a little bit. It'll reset after a bit of time, but while you're in that state, you can start moving again. It doesn't bounce up and down, and now it doesn't slow down either.
Oh,
It's like on
geez.
cruise control. So that's a little bit of a bug.
Wow.
Again,
That's
not a very serious one. And actually, before I forget, I have another example that I have not mentioned anything to you about. So this might be an interesting surprise, or it might be really stupid. I'm not sure.
let it ride.
But I think I can tell you something about yourself as an example of this kind of like level of observation and detective stuff. So I'm gonna make an observation, and then I'll explain why I think that.
Okay.
I think your kitchen knives get dull faster than they should.
Not really. I don't think so. But I
It
but I
wouldn't be
have I
very.
have sharpened. Go ahead.
It wouldn't be like really severe, but I'll explain why I make that observation.
Okay.
In the background of your Twitter picture, I can see a knife
Uh-oh.
block. And
Oh.
and the knife block has the slots vertical.
Mm-hmm.
Vertical knife slots will be resting on their blade and leave you prone to cutting into the block a little bit when you put them in or take them out, which puts unnecessary wear on the blade, where horizontal slots don't have that wear.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very. As soon as you mentioned the knife lock, I'm like, okay, I know where he's going with this. No, they probably actually, you know what? I will agree with you. Yes, they do get dull faster than they probably should, but we do have a sharpener, and I have, sharpened our knives.
mm-hmm.
So you're not
Like I said,
entirely...
the effect from the block is going to be pretty minimal, but it would be there.
Yes. So that I would agree with. So yes, you are good. You are good, my my good friend. All right, so we're going to move on to some tech and science news. We got quite a list. I think I might skip over a couple of these, but some of these, and as I've mentioned to some people, and I've also mentioned these two, I was at a couple cons recently, actually. One up in Saratoga here in New York, and just discussing people what I do on this podcast. Like these, I try to find these science and tech articles that are really interesting, and like a lot of stuff is going on in these fields that like never really get any publicity, or they're not really talked about, I feel. So the first one I actually heard while I was commuting to work. It came on NPR, and I'm going to get the title of this article exactly. So I'm going to open up this link. Genetically altered skin saves a boy dying of a rare disease. Now, I'll have a link to this in the show notes, and you could actually hear the broadcast of this. It's got a little player embedded into the webpage. You can actually hear the original broadcast. This is from All Things Considered. And the synopsis of this is, there's a boy, this in particular, this case is over in Europe, and he has a rare skin disease called, and I'm going to try not to butcher this, epidermolysis bullosa. And in effect, what it is, his skin doesn't bond properly between its layers. Oh God. So what happened? And did you read the article? Did you listen to
I did.
Okay.
The first,
So,
I mean, like looking at it, the first thing I remembered was there was actually a documentary about another kid suffering from this, and it was called the Child with the Butterfly Skin or something like that.
Okay.
Butterfly skin
I'll
is
look
another
that up,
name
and I'll
for it.
add a
It's
link to it in the
horrible.
notes. The child.
Yeah.
I'm scribbling right now. Okay, so there's actually a documentary regarding this disease, or do you know if it was this case in particular?
I believe it was about a particular case, and it was just horrible what someone suffering from this has to go through. And I think it's tremendous that, they, first of all, that you can do something to address this. And I don't know, sometimes I think I look at things from a like 20 degrees off of normal, where I look at this like, okay, the kid has new skin now that they use to treat him, and it works just fine, and it's all his normal skin, and this is to get over this other problem. And the bit that actually stuck out to me the most was they mailed the new skin to him. Like, it was shipped.
Yeah.
Did you catch that part? It was like shipped from Germany. It's like,
I don't think I did catch that part.
Weird.
Yeah. But it worked.
I mean, it's cool. It's just, that's the one that like, well, kind of going into an article like that, you're like, okay, cool, kid, skin saved, problems there. They mailed it rather than having him come to that. Well, I mean, I suppose having the condition would make moving the kid difficult, but I mean, that was the bit that stuck out to me.
Yeah. No, that is, well, I'm trying to find it right now, because I don't think it was mentioned in the original broadcast. But, oh, here it is. So DeLuca was able to grow entire sheets of the engineered epidermis, which were shipped to the hospital in Germany. Wow. All right, there it is. All right, so pushing a little bit more into this story. So the layers of this child's skin, who, by the way, is only 7 years old, they don't bond properly. So his skin literally doesn't stay where it's supposed to. His epidermis has sloughed off, or does on occasion. So there's a picture of him farther down, and he looks, I mean, some parts of his skin look a bit rough, but definitely he's doing much better than he was before. Here's how they did it. They were able to use both genetic engineering. So they were able to fix whatever it was in the genes. They were able to deliver this. Oh, I'm getting my details mixed up because this is fantastic to do actually during the show. It's a combination of gene therapy and stem cell research is what happened.
Yeah.
Like,
and it was what, injecting the genetic modifications via a virus, I think it was.
yes. And
so modifying the virus to modify the skin to be able to have it help the kid.
Right. I mean, because they tried all sorts of stuff. They even tried using skin grafts from the child's own father, and they were still having issues. So they were able to deliver the new genes through this virus, which they acknowledge, like, yes, this genetically engineering a virus even to transmit beneficial information or genetics does pose some problems as far as increasing the possibility of increased other health risks, such as, yes, cancer. But in the meantime, they were able to do this boy's, I think it was 80% of his body had to be like regrafted or retreated.
Yeah,
so
I think
this
it was
is
60%. Yeah, 60% of his epidermis had sloughed off at 7 years old.
Yeah, there is nothing positive about this. And since we got a lot more stuff to move on, I highly, highly recommend anyone listening to this, go to this article, listen to the full story, because we're kind of butchering the details right now. But what you need to know is they were able to use some gene therapy with some stem cell research, deliver the new genes to these separate grafts of skin, of newly created, I guess, skin, ship them over to the boy. And at this point, he's actually running around in gym class playing soccer with no issues.
Mm-hmm. That's the awesome part.
I know, like, that is what really like sets it for me. Like, this kid is now playing soccer. We can joke about how soccer is or is not a high contact sport, whatever. He's playing sports. He is straight up playing sports at this point with no issue.
Well, with a condition like that, I would think running would have been a risky proposition in the first place.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And by think, so I mean, would say.
Yeah. So that's actually turns into like an actual feel-good article.
And you also got to remember that this isn't just because the condition is rare. There's a lot of effort that went into it, and it's able to help people, and that's wonderful. And from a practical standpoint, you might say, okay, this is a lot of effort for one person. But you also have to remember that there's lessons that are drawn from this that can be applied to all kinds of other stuff too. So this isn't just about like one kid or a small number of kids. Because there's people who would look at this and say, well, couldn't all of this effort have been applied to, say, cancer? You know, just something to get more bang for the buck at first or something. But like I said, lessons from this can be applied to other things. It's like, okay, we didn't go to the moon just for the sake of getting to the moon. Look at all the other stuff that came out of that. Or, you know, computers. When you're designing a fancy calculator, would you have imagined the internet?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. So like for this one in general, or in particular, we proved that this could be done. We did a large scale skin graft. We were able to use the virus to deliver this treatment in a successful way. Like, all these things happened while developing a treatment for, yes, one individual, but I mean, it shouldn't take much creative processing to think of additional applications for this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to skip down a little bit, and you mentioned going to the moon. So you accept that we did go to the moon?
Yes. Yes, I do. Nice segue.
Thank you for that. So this could have been an amazing story, but unfortunately we're going to have to wait a little bit for it. Some friends of mine at the office sent me this, and there is a flat earther out there. I don't want to give him too much dignity, but he's trying to prove that the earth is flat, and he built his own homemade rocket, and he is going to launch himself high enough to take pictures to prove that the earth is in fact flat. Unfortunately, on the day that he was going to launch, he got the kibosh from the big bad government because no, they are not going to let you launch off of public land. No, we're not going to let you do that.
Did he file a flight plan?
I don't know.
I don't think so. Well, if you look at it, it also looks like he's not exactly great at rockets anyway.
Well, I mean, he understands all this. Now, I'm opening the article right now. Here's a quote directly from the article, and this is him speaking to the Associated Press. I don't believe in science. I know about aerodynamics and fluid dynamics and how things move through the air, about the certain size of rocket nozzles and thrust. But that's not science, that's just a formula. There's no difference between science and science fiction. Oh my God.
I don't.
Like, we've been. Why is this still a thing?
Like, you can fly in an airplane high enough to see the curve. Like
this
it would
isn't
be easier to just get on one of those.
Like,
talk to those,
this.
high altitude weather balloon halo jumpers. They can see it.
Yes.
The ones who basically do skydiving in a spacesuit.
Right. Oh yeah, that was fantastic. But like, we've been over this. I feel that things like this are ignored by the public at large because it's been established, and you just laugh at these people. And it doesn't warrant a response, but then it gets to the point where, oh my God, we actually need to talk about this.
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel your comments, like you made a great observation about naval latitudinal navigation. Like, in order to establish, go for
it. You can't. Any sailor, like, not only have we known that the Earth is round for millennia. Not since Columbus.
Millennia. Literally millennia.
You cannot be a sailor and be able to navigate by the stars and not know not only that the Earth is round, but pretty close to how big it is. Because, back in the day, like, if you were going to go around Africa to get to India from England or do any of that navigation, basically anytime you're going to cross the equator, guess what you lose? The North Star. All of your stars and navigation points change. If you're going to know how far you're going north and south, you have to triangulate that on the surface of a sphere. Like, it doesn't work. And on top of that, like, if you're in a crow's nest with a looking glass, guess what you can't see of another ship that's far away? The water line. It's like
so many things.
This really bothers me because I mentioned Columbus, like the whole, like, Columbus proved the Earth was round. No. Everyone knew it then. And this fantasy keeps getting repeated so that people believe it. Oh, he did this to prove the Earth was round. First of all, no, everyone knew the Earth was round. He was just stupid and thought it was smaller than it was. And I have no idea how he got funding. But anyway, if you're going to say, oh, they proved the Earth was round, that's not Columbus, it's Magellan, because he's the one who actually went all the way around.
Okay, so Magellan, yes, he's now credited with the first person to completely navigate. It's only because he was the one who actually went the full distance. They had no idea that a giant-ass continent of the Americas existed at the time. So as they go across the Atlantic, because they can't see that landmass due to the curvature of the Earth, surprise, there's a giant landmass in the way. And even in this article, I had heard about this years ago, just like as a kind of an interesting aside. I never thought I'd be bringing this up in another science discussion, but over 2,000 years ago, one of the Greek, oh man, I'm going to forget his name, but he's listed in the article. It was in ancient Greece. They knew that you could see to the bottom of a deep well during a certain time of the year. Probably, in the midsummer when the sun is the highest. So you can see all the way down to the bottom of a deep well. Elsewhere in the world, he knows that this is not possible. You can only see a certain distance down. So by using basic trig, they were able to, okay, I know where this city is and how far down the sun will shine during this part of the year. I know the distance between these two cities, and I send someone or make the observation himself, how far down does the sun actually shine? Because it's going to come down at an angle at this point as you go north across the Earth's surface. So you figure out the angle, figure out the distance, do some math, and he actually got, it doesn't say exactly how close he got, but it just says relatively close to the actual size of the Earth. So we're talking.
Yeah, I would guess that it was within 5 to 10% of what's right.
Well, I mean,
close.
2,000 plus years ago, that's pretty close.
Yeah.
So, like, part of me wants him to have a successful launch. I really want him to do this. And I want to witness the collapse of all of his reality when he comes down and says, it is round. I don't know what is real anymore. Besides the Earth being round, of course.
Apparently he was also like a recent convert to being a flat earther, so maybe he's just doing some of this for attention and funding or something. I don't know. But generally, I think you want to shut all this up. Neil deGrasse Tyson put out a thing of a lunar eclipse that a flat earther has never seen, and it was the moon with like a little horizontal line taken out for the shadow of the supposed disk of the Earth. I mean, if flat Earth doesn't make any sense for seasons and lengths of the day and all this other stuff, it's stupid.
Everything. And one last comment before we move on to the next bit. Just want to note that the rocket that he is going to be riding up on is actually steam powered. So there's that.
Why don't we just shove him onto like a supply mission to the International Space Station, and you can just write it down or something like that? And just like
just a ride along
space tourism thing. Like get the most prominent flat earther you can and just strap them in and make them look.
Oh my god!
Just to get everybody to shut up. I mean, it's expensive to launch somebody into orbit, but it might be worth it to make everybody shut up about this. This is the most asinine thing.
So the holidays are right around the corner. And with
all I want for Christmas is less stupid in the world.
And with every major website and publication, everyone puts out their Christmas gift guides. So Popular Mechanics is also in that list. So in the show notes, I'll be making a link to the Popular Mechanics holiday gift guide with our picks. So how about we do this? Both of us have picked 2 little items. And how about we go back and forth, you, me. So Kynetyk, what is your
first?
Nick,
that's fine.
Okay, well, wasn't sure.
No, it's fine. I go by Nick.
Behind
Kynetyk's the nom de plume.
Kynetyk's real name is Nick. Okay, so what's your first goodie? What's your first gift?
The one I picked from here first is the Thermapen. It's a probe thermometer for like grills and meat.
Okay.
I picked this one because I actually already have one.
Oh, really?
It's really nice. The one pictured here is blue and mine is red, so that makes a total difference, right?
Right. Absolutely.
No, it's really nice. It's the probe itself is nice and sturdy, so you can get it right into where you want. It's long enough so like if you're trying to get it into something hot, you're not about to burn your hand by getting in close. It's not like one of the other kinds of probe thermometers where you got to stick it in and wait for the like spring-loaded indicator to go to the right temperature. The temperature comes up really fast. So if you want to say open the oven and check the temperature on a roast, it only takes a couple seconds.
Okay. Nice.
Oh, I like this thing. It's nice.
Cool.
It's listed here as $79. I'd say if you grill enough, it's worth it.
Awesome.
And I've never had a problem with it. I've had it for years.
Cool. Oh, wow. Okay. Nice. All right. So my first gift is so this one's a little pricey, but is the Goal Zero Venture 30 Solar Recharging Kit. And it's listing on Amazon at $170, so it's pricey. But here's the thing. It is a solar they're basically solar panels that you can wear on the back of your backpack. And I put this on because actually just recently, my wife and I, we take our son out, just to do stuff. And there are a few really nice nature preserves and state parks in the area. And uh, we just got back into doing a little bit of geocaching, if you've ever done that.
Mm-mm.
It's a lot of fun. You go out into the woods. There are these things called geocaches all over the world, and you can use the Groundspeak geocaching app for the official geocache listings, and they're just little containers hidden just everywhere, all over the world. And all they do is give you like a brief description, a little story behind this cache, which is a container that can be the size of either a pill bottle all the way up to like an ammo container. And they're just, here are some GPS coordinates, here's a little something about it, and go find it. So like in the middle of like state and national parks, there are these little canisters that are just hidden everywhere. And you can use your phone to find them or other GPS locator. And you just go out into the woods and see what you can find. And so I put this on the list because if you're going to be using your phone, depending on how much stuff you have on your phone or how old your battery is, you might be losing your charge.
Or how big
quickly.
your screen is.
That too. And just in general, just the way that tech is going, everything's getting more electronic. So as much fun as it is to just go out and leave everything, in the car or at home behind you, the truth of the matter is, more and more things, handy little gadgetry, they're getting more and more, electronic, and especially something that uses GPS for whatever you're using it for, they all require power. So this little thing, it is the Nomad 7 solar panel reef. The battery itself is weatherproof, durable, and good for 3 phone charges. So you can recharge your phone, depending on its battery size, up to 3 times off of one charge on this thing. So depending on how much you're doing outside, or if you are a hardcore enthusiast, or you got a lot of people with you who are all doing outdoor activities, having a mobile battery that recharges, as it says in the article, you can just hook it to your backpack. Having a little recharge station might be kind of useful. Again, it's $170, so it's not exactly cheap, but yeah, depending how much of an enthusiast you are, something to either look into, or maybe looking into just a recharger in general, maybe a less expensive model. So back to you.
All right. The other one that I had was the, let me see here. That was the Miyabi Artisan SG2 8-inch chef's knife.
Speaking
one of the reasons
kitchen knives.
Yes, that's kind of, actually, some of the reasons I know this stuff is I used to sell knives.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, what was that?
Yeah.
Anyway, go for it.
Yeah, a good table or a good chef's knife is always nice to have. I would say that this one might be a bit overpriced, honestly.
Okay.
$200 for an 8-inch chef's knife seems much to me. But, if it, because you can get like a 9 or 10-inch for a really good one for less than that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if it works with your, I would say some of the most important stuff there is, one, make sure it keeps its edge well. Like we talked about before, the knives are going to dull, and you're going to need to resharpen them at some point if you're going to keep the knife. I mean, that's just how blades work,
Yeah, it happens.
But if it's weighted well, comfortable in your hand, because damn, when you're dealing with blades, you do not want them to slip around.
No, you don't. It doesn't take a sharp edge to slice through flesh, especially if you're actually putting pressure on the knife to cut through, meat, which is what your finger is. If it starts to wobble around on you, it's going to be painful.
It's a little counterintuitive that the sharper knife, if you give it the proper respect, is the safer knife because it's easier to maintain control of while it's cutting.
Yeah, and I will also say, as my wife and I try to cook as much as we can at home, having a proper chef's knife or just a proper set of knives makes the cooking process so much easier.
Oh yeah, yeah. And the chef's knife is probably going to be your go-to for a lot of situations. Just remember, this is a chef's knife, not a butcher knife.
Right.
A lot of people get that wrong when they're watching Halloween. They think, oh, Michael Myers with the butcher knife. No, that's a chef's knife. Butcher knives don't stab. Butcher knives are nice and thick. And you use those to do the like hacking through frozen stuff and bones and really hard stuff. Do not use the chef's knife for that. The chef's knife is thin and far more delicate. Okay?
Yes. Get your horror lore correct.
Also, just get your knives correct, because if you're using a chef's knife for butcher knife purposes, it's going to break and you're going to have a sharp piece flying across the kitchen.
Amateurs. All right. Last one that we got here. This is from their 25 things that every DIYer should own. This is actually pretty cheap. It is the Bucket Boss Tool Tote for $15. And if you're doing stuff around the house, or this is actually be great for my wife, and I doubt she even listens to this podcast, so I can talk about it here. She actually volunteers at one of the local animal shelters, and she is one of the people. She doesn't go to like walk the dogs. She actually volunteers on the groundskeeping crew. So she'll go out with this bucket full of gardening tools and stuff and help maintain the grounds and prune stuff back and all that other fun stuff. And right now she uses a bucket that's just filled with an assortment of hand tools. So either for that, or if you just need to grab like your more than just your basic toolbox, you can actually, there's a picture of this thing. It's actually a wrap, I guess I'll call it, that folds around your common 5-gallon bucket. So anything you can find at Lowe's or Home Depot that's like excessively branded for a few bucks. You throw this thing on top of the bucket, and it has all these extra side pockets just everywhere on the thing.
It looks like a tool belt for a bucket.
It is. That's exactly what it is. And for $15, you throw this on top of, any old 5-gallon bucket you have laying around if you're doing any type of home repairs, or you got to go make a house call to someone. If it basically turns a bucket into your ultimate go bag for most home repair type things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one, inexpensive way to transform any 5-gallon bucket into a portable tool caddy with more than 30 pockets. And if your bucket breaks, just transfer the Bucket Boss to a new one. So, yeah, it's basically just a canvas slip that you put over top, and it's got straps and loops and pockets all over the place. So, definitely worth checking out, and especially for only $15.
Yeah, and I mean, hell, I've never wanted to deal with a tool belt. I would be more prone to use a bucket, honestly. Right. And then if you're in a position where you're up on a ladder, you want to hang the bucket in easy arm's reach, or do you want to reach down to your tool belt?
Right. So there's your official VGXT podcast gift guide.
You didn't tell me this was going to be official.
Oh, my bad. All right, last item on here, and it really doesn't fit with the science and technology,
but it is a fun fact.
It's a fun fact, especially since you and I actually had a little back and forth that went accidentally viral regarding this fine individual.
Yes.
And I'm going to let you take the lead on this one, since it's one of the articles that you sent over for the show. Andrew WK's album cover art reveal.
Yeah, so Andrew WK's been on tour, and you and I have had, like you said, a bit of a back and forth on Twitter, and then how did that go? Like you said, hey, Andrew WK follows me, fun fact, and then I said, aren't all Andrew WK facts party facts and all party facts fun facts? So isn't that kind of redundant?
Something like that.
And then I drew a Venn diagram of this, where all fact. Let's see. I'll just go from in to out. You got Andrew WK facts are an entire subset of party facts, are an entire subset of fun facts, are an entire subset of facts.
There we go.
And it went up. He retweeted it like at the end of the night, so it was up front on his Twitter feed for like a day.
And yeah,
so now Andrew WK follows us both.
Yeah, so fun party fact, Andrew WK follows us both on Twitter.
And he's been touring and announced that he was going to have a new album out, and it was within the week he unveiled cover art for the new album, and it's a little trippy. I mean, not certainly the weird serpentine dragon in the bushes on the lower right's trippy, but everything else is like kind of, starlight, and I don't know. I want to say impressionist, but I don't think I'm using the word right in this case.
Yeah, I would be the last person to ask to get the actual art theme style descriptor.
So it's
correct.
like it looks like he's standing in like a, I don't know, rain slicked. It's not raining, but it looks like the street he's on is wet in a residential neighborhood. And you can see stars and planets overhead. There's a tree to his right. For some reason, there's someone standing in a window across the street. I don't know what that's about. And it's a picture of him probably from a concert or something. And he's looking kind of down into his left. And there you see kind of in the bushes, this weird snake dragon thing.
Yeah. Yeah, not sure what's going on. He's basically in the middle of the street of what could be characterized as Everytown America.
Mm-hmm.
And actually that pose, he actually posed for that. There's a video a little farther down in the article where it talks about him meeting the artists that do that. And they actually took photographs of him standing like that. And they used that as like the basis for the art.
I still think it's weird that he tucks his microphone into the front of his pants like that.
But... Yeah, that's weird. That's weird because everything else about this photo, this cover art, it's actually pretty cool and pretty artistic. The art is done very well. Like you said, it's kind of a rain slick street, but maybe after a storm or something like that. How the sky is clear,
and you can tell it's supposed to be that. That's not just supposed to be the color of the street, because the person in the window across the street, they're backlit, and that's reflected on the street. So
yes, it is.
Oh, and so the porch light from the other houses too.
Yep. Huh. So it's very calm. It's very almost serene and peaceful. But then he has his microphone stuck in the front of his pants, so that's a little out of place.
It actually looks like an album cover that I think would fit for 55 Cadillac, his piano solo album. Just because, like you said, it does look very serene, and that's kind of a mellow album.
Okay. Yeah, did not get a chance to check that one out. But so yeah, like I said, there's a YouTube video of him meeting up with the artist, and apparently these two people, Boris Vallejo and Julie Bell, are fantasy artists. And the story of how they met was pretty cool. Did you get a chance to watch the video?
That one I did not.
Okay. Highly suggest it. Turns out they actually met at the gym where Julie was competing in bodybuilding, and Boris, he's just going for his workouts, and he would ask some of the bodybuilders if they would be his model for him to paint. And like I said, they're both like fantasy artists, and that's basically how they met, because Julie mentioned to Boris that, yes, I do some art as well. And that's how their relationship grew. And they go into a little bit of their art design process of how Julie would do a lot of pencil work at first, and then kind of finish that off. And that becomes like her basis for her oil paints. And she uses her oils on top of her pencil sketchings and artistry. And that eventually becomes the full painting. And as Andrew WK grew up reading comic books, he started noticing their names in like the bottom corner of a lot of the artwork, and there was something going on. He was asked to either host a show, I'm forgetting the exact details, but he saw that the the artists were going to be these two people that he had adored. And that's how they ended up hooking up and meeting and organizing a shoot and commissioning the album art cover. Or the album cover art. Words matter. Okay. So, yeah, there's a new cover art for Andrew WK's upcoming album. We got a track listing towards the end.
Yep. And always nice to have more party music.
I know. He knows exactly where he fits in the musical landscape. He knows exactly what he's doing. And it really is refreshing to have him on your Twitter feed, because as joking and sarcastic, I don't know if sarcastic is the appropriate word, but it's still so incredibly positive. He is still such like an incredibly positive person. And it's refreshing to have that on your Twitter feed every once in a while, just because completely self-indulgent. Like, he'll just randomly tweet out a video of him zooming in on his pizza slice guitar, just because. Because it's always time for pizza.
Yeah. I mean, that was Andrew WK was the inspiration for our Halloween, our team's Halloween decorations at the office this year. We did,
nice.
We just went completely atypical, and instead of doing like, oh, we're going to do something, no, we're going to do something totally different, and it's just going to be like party. And we set it up. It was like, pull this lever to start the party, and everyone was primed. And like the moment this lever was pulled, we hit a couple things, like Andrew WK music video started, and we all just jumped up and like throwing confetti. We had like rigged up a confetti cannon with some rubber bands, and a couple people had toilet paper they started going. Someone was playing beer pong with ginger ale. We had a couple people do a pizza eating contest, which, by the way, the guy who swore he'd be able to win lost.
Oh, like, my God, they're dead.
Well, that was just funny because when we were setting it up, it's like, okay, who wants to just wolf down a pizza? And he's like, I'll do that. I can wolf down a pizza so fast. I'm like, hey, we want to try to get someone else to do a contest for that. And the other guy won. The guy who said he could eat really fast, like, grabbed a bit too much and kind of had to slow down so he didn't choke.
Oh, the pacing. But the pacing is required.
Yeah, and we got like just white t-shirts for everybody. I got long hair. I got some fake blood to go down my nose, down my chin, onto my shirt.
Oh,
I made a little. We had a pumpkin decorating contest. I redid that there. I gave the pumpkin like a little wig and put a face on him. Put more fake blood on that. Gave it a little white shirt cut out of paper.
That is amazing.
We did karaoke, and I sang "Party Hard."
There you go.
Which, by the way, singing Party Hard and trying to dance like Andrew WK, you look at there's like, yeah, that's exhausting. That is absolutely exhausting. I could barely keep it up for one song.
Oh, man.
And people were like, and we did karaoke just with the YouTube video, and people would usually like have the lyrics up there, and I go, Party Hard. I just put up the video, no lyrics, and they're like, oh, you're going without lyrics. It's Party Hard. There's like 17 words in it.
Yeah, there's 17 different words. It's an anthem, people. It's an anthem. We got this. All right, so time for an Audible interlude. For you, the listeners of the Video Game Crosstalk podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. All you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/VGXTpod and sign up for your free trial and download one of over 180,000 titles, such as Artemis by Andy Weir, narrated by Rosario Dawson. And this book is essentially from the publisher summary, the best-selling author of The Martian returns with an irresistible near-future thriller, a heist story set on the moon. So this sounds pretty cool. And were you able to either read or go see The Martian?
I did not. I will.
That's unfortunate. Highly recommend it. Absolutely highly recommend it. It was a great story, really, really well done movie, and this is definitely something that I personally will be picking up.
And apparently Gabe from Penny Arcade had trouble getting through the Artemis book because it's a lot of big words, so if you're hearing it rather than reading it, that might be easier.
Hey, there you go. So just another example for you to go to audibletrial.com/VGXTpod and download this audiobook for free. So, moving on into some gaming and geekery. Now, we're not gonna dive deep into this. I just want to talk about a little bit of why this keeps coming up as a thing, and some of the business decisions that probably went on behind this. So recently, there was an entire EA slash Battlefront 2 nonsense, I'm going to call it, and it all revolves around loot boxes and microtransactions. And if you are in the gaming community and you do not know about this uh, epic failure of a launch, you need to not call yourself a gamer.
Maintain blissful ignorance.
Because it was everywhere. So I don't really want to get into it in this specific instance. So now, Kynetyk, you work in the gaming industry, so give me a little bit of like business background for some of the topics that surround this.
Well, I think to kind of step it back a little bit, the video games industry is in kind of a weird spot right now. And there's a lot of discussion that goes on, not necessarily on every individual project level, but if you look at the industry as a whole, you know, for a released game, prices have remained pretty stagnant for quite some time at about $60. Okay. How do you try to compensate for that? Because development costs go way up. And there's some people who's like, oh, development costs don't go up because budgets are the same and this and that and the other. It's like, okay, but they're not taking other stuff into account. It's like, okay, well, the budget for this publisher is the same, but they're releasing like 1/3 as many titles. So yeah, budgets are going up. Don't lie to yourself about that. Particular for these big releases. And when you get to big releases like this, things get really complicated. So budgets are going up, the price remains stagnant. How do you make things meet? Do you sell more units or do you find new ways to monetize? And rightly or wrongly, people try to add in-app purchases or other stuff. Now, when it comes to loot boxes specifically, I don't have much of an opinion at the moment, but in terms of the conversation of how do you get money out of it, like there's some people who, like Jim Sterling is notorious for his quote fee to pay, where you buy a game and there's in-app purchases within it. I don't necessarily mind that in certain instances. For example, the example I always give is Street Fighter 3 Online Edition, where you can either unlock Gil by playing the game a bunch and trying to beat it with every character, and that's an absolute pain, or you can have spent $2 and unlock Gil. And Gil's a son of a bitch. Why would you not want to just try him to have some fun? If you don't have the time, because as we get older, time is a more precious resource to us than money much of the time. Sure, I'll kick a couple bucks to unlock this guy. Are you going to keep trying to... Would you prefer that content be walled off by skill and progression systems that require time that some customers don't have? Or are you begrudging that there is a way around that with money? Okay, that focuses on single player stuff. You go to multiplayer stuff. Okay, at this point, you're talking about, oh, is it pay to win? Well, if someone buys something that gives them a more pleasant user experience and they're, I don't know, skilled or not skilled, whatever, then you have to rely on the matchmaking algorithm. Is that doing its job well? Because chances are, if you're talking, quote, pay to win, unquote, in these environments, you're not talking about like world champion, like world leaderboard kind of people. So really, it's all of this is relative. You're not going into an absolute, I am paying to be the best in the world. And the point of all of this really is, all of these are questions that we have to figure out. How do we make everything make mathematical sense, or rather financial sense? What is acceptable? And a lot of people really get it mixed up between the publishers and the developers and so forth. Who's responsible for what? And a lot of the times people like just reflexively blame the publisher and praise the developer. And I will just tell you straight up, it's not never true, but it's not 100% true either. Okay.
Yeah.
There are times where The publisher is trying to save the developers from themselves. These things happen, and the publisher doesn't always get their way, and problems happen from it, and then the publisher gets blamed for not doing what they were trying to do in the first place, and the developer was at fault there. So it's just, we're in a stage right here where we, as an industry, are trying to figure out a new way to make these things make sense. These loot box things are one effort, and it's in the process of generating a backlash, which means whether or not, if you look at it and say, oh, this business would have been fine, this business is or is not taking advantage of customers. There's arguments about taking advantage of gambling tendencies in people. Maybe not. Like I said, I don't have a fully fleshed out and informed opinion on that particular aspect of it. But it is still a question. And when these backlashes happen, you have to say, well, look, clearly there is a miscalculation in terms of what the market is willing to support in exchange for providing this service. Because, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I don't like games as a service. Guess what? If you're connected to a server, your game is a service. That's it. Or if you're expecting any updates, it's a service. All right. Yeah. It's not a box product anymore.
We're going to bring it back a little bit. There was a recent tweet that I retweeted, and it was, would you pay $100 for a Super Mario game? Because with inflation, that's how much they would cost today. And there was an article that came out a few months back, where Street Fighter 2 Turbo was getting a re-release for the Super Nintendo, just because, I guess. And it was coming out at like $90 or $100. And they're doing a limited run. I don't know how many they were making, but you know, it seemed like a lot. And that sparked a discussion between some friends of mine, and we were able to find these old, I don't know if it was KB Toys or Kmart or some old like repository of business flyers and retail flyers and stuff like that. Somewhere on the internet, such a repository exists. And it was from the mid-90s, showing Street Fighter 2 and a few other games. And these games were like $60, $50, and like $70 for a base game. So we're talking Super Nintendo, mid-90s, $70 for a standard game. Fast forward 20-something years, and games are now locked at $60 for AAA titles. And then you talk about like the development costs. Well, I just listened to another podcast, the Super Best Friends had on the guy from Naughty Dog. I'm forgetting his name. Last name is Cher. But talk about how he worked on some games at Naughty Dog, and the entire staff was maybe 25 people. My God, you beat a game today, and the staff involved is comparable to a blockbuster movie these days. But that's a lot of people.
I mean, well, the other thing is, you're talking about staff on the game. Is that just the development team, or are you also talking about marketing and PR, HR, community support?
I don't think like PR. I don't think accounting and other business type positions are included in these credits. You know,
QA.
And
if you go for a console release, your QA team's probably going to be more than 20 people.
Oh, I bet. And I'm sure that, you know, depending on what city these, you know, studios are based in, you got to pay a salary that is appropriate for their skill level and the local economy, local living conditions. Like up here in Albany, when we tried to compare, you know, pay rates and how much an apartment costs or something like that, we just assumed that cost of living in New York City is double of that what we pay here.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, exactly. New York City is no joke. My brother, over a decade ago, lived down in the city, and he was paying like his share of the rent was like $2,800 a month or something like that.
Eesh.
Yeah. You know, his share of the rent was, you know, $2,000.
So house for that.
Yeah, exactly. And one of his other apartments I helped him move into, I was confused because his bedroom didn't have a closet in it. And then I remembered as I walked through the quote living room, part of his apartment, there were these two armoires just kind of hanging out. I'm like, oh, your closet isn't even in your room, because that's how tiny these places are. So take that into consideration when you're talking about, anyone at any level. You're going to have to pay them a comparable amount for, one, their skill level, and two, their cost of living within that city. And that there's going to be literally hundreds of people working on these AAA releases. Yeah, it's expensive. I don't care how many thousand or million copies you sell, it's still going to be hard to recoup the initial cost, let alone have any profit, especially if, and the main game that I've been playing these days is Destiny, you're going to have continued support, continued updates, and managed servers to play these games on.
Because maintaining those servers isn't cheap either. Like,
right.
Unless you're a really small game, like a pretty modest game, a very modest game could probably have easily in the 5 digits a month, like tens of thousands of dollars a month to just keep servers up.
Right.
And that's a modest game.
Right. So how do you financially pull this off? And that's where microtransactions come in.
Yeah. And
so
here's another thing to consider with that. So if you're looking at a release as $60, okay, well, one of the things is, okay, do you raise the price to come in? Okay, well, if you raise the price to come in, you're going to get fewer people buying it. So that might not balance itself out. So game developers are probably going to be a little bit weary of that. And in turn, that's also why there's collector's editions and pre-orders and stuff to try to lock in. We know that this transaction is going to happen. You can rely on that revenue, or trying to get a little bit of extra stuff, give a little bit of extra stuff to people to get a little bit of extra revenue. But on the other hand, you go free to play, you're reducing the barrier to entry, and you're removing the limit of how much people can pay. And that's one of the kind of funny things you ran into with free-to-play games. You actually have to be careful making the game to not get in the way of people trying to give you money. Because sometimes there can be progression gateways. Like, okay, you got to get this far to be able to unlock this stuff. And some of that is dependent on being able to get to the store where people can spend money on your game and give you money. I've worked on games where they actually got in the way of that. They were actually preventing players from being able to pay them, and it made the business suffer to some extent.
Yeah. Oops.
Yeah, and so that's one of those really quick truisms. Again, with this stuff, you might take you can kind of veer off into discussions of what's proper level of stuff. Are you taking advantage of gambling addictions, shopping addictions? Is it predatory? And that's a
much higher level of conversation than I'm equipped to properly discuss.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's a huge other topic. But if you're just looking at it as why is the business trying to do that? That's one of the reasons why there are new expenses. There are recurring expenses that the businesses have to be able to attend to. And I mean, people say greedy publishers all the time, but guess who has to front the money for development? For the most part, it's a publisher. And if you don't have any publishers, a lot of developers aren't going to get the investment funds they need to actually bring games out. So yeah, you're going to have someone like EA turning to what was it, Ragtag, saying, hey, FIFA makes $1 billion a year. Where's your version of that? Well, they want to know, is this something that's going to be a tent pole that we can use to fund other games that may or may not work? Or is this the risky one? You need to be able to ask those questions to address and examine the topic in order to just understand what the upside is on the business side.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that kind of sets me off about some of this stuff. Like I said, I can go off on this for a while, right, in the notes. If people just have this knee-jerk reaction thinking they understand something, and this isn't necessarily to say that their instincts are incorrect necessarily. I'm not going to say that, but most of the time their reasoning is incomplete.
Right.
There's just stuff that they are not taking into account, that if you are going to have a fully thought out and reasoned argument, you have to include these things.
So
You can't just say, oh, publishers are greedy. No, I say it all the time. Business got a business, so someone's got to pay the piper at some point. These things aren't charity. I need to keep a roof over my head.
Yeah, and let's be honest. All businesses are in the business of making money. The only thing that difference is how they go about that.
Mm-hmm.
Is EA an evil corporate greed monster? Well, maybe, but let's back this up a little bit and just go over all the things that we just said. There's a lot going on here. Microtransactions and loot boxes, they're the only ways that these companies really can stay in business and still maintain a proper level of quality product, really. So
yeah,
I'm going to break the cycle right
thing
there.
I want to mention with this,
still got like a lot of stuff to move on with this, but I mean, in general,
all right,
development costs are like so through the roof, and game prices for a full game haven't increased in, well, a good 20 something years. It's expensive. And these are things that people are going to have to work out. Much smarter brains than mine are going to be the ones to figure out where that precise, balance is. In this particular instance, maybe EA with Battlefront 2, they went a little too far with it and they need to scale it back. Maybe. That's just the way it's going to be. We're going to need to get used to having some form of microtransactions within games at this point if it's going to maintain a sustained presence. So
one really quick thing I'd like to just cap off with.
Do it up.
It's not all one way. I will say that I have heard someone who has been very important in the history of EA after they were there, refer to them as the evil empire. So this was a long time ago, but it's
they don't have the
just because I'm saying you have to consider the side doesn't mean they are innocent. I'm just saying consider things.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they are the evil empire, but they might have a track record in this instance. but that's fine. So moving on. As always, I have a Netflix discussion to discuss. We'll just touch on these really quick. No more new Marvel shows will be coming to Netflix as Disney wants to buy Fox and complete their own streaming service. That kind of sucks for me in particular. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a sign of the market for streaming services developing into another phase of its existence. So we've had like YouTube as the free version, as your sort of public access streaming, which has turned out to be, tremendous for both good and ill. And then you wind up with, again, business got a business, who's going to pay the piper, adpocalypse stuff.
Yep. Oh yeah, we are definitely at the adpocalypse phase. My God.
And Netflix as your paid premium service, your cable or HBO kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, we've learned that business model is successful. And when you have a successful disruptive business model, well, it was successful because it was in the blue ocean. If you know about blue ocean, red ocean strategy, most people tend to compete in red ocean because that's where the meat is. You go to a blue ocean, there's no competition there, and you hope to find something. Netflix found something. And now other people want to go there and feed off the meat, turn the blue water red. And so Disney owns their IP. They think maybe they can have their own individual branded stuff. This is also why you have like Star Trek Discoveries on the CBS streaming service, and you got Amazon streaming service, Hulu streaming service. Other people are trying to do their own stuff. And while as a consumer, it can certainly be more convenient to have everything in the same place. I don't know exactly what this will wind up meaning if your selection becomes fragmented. I am not prepared to prognosticate on that level.
Right.
In the short term, it's certainly a bummer. I don't know if it will remain a bummer. That is not me saying that things will get better from this. It's possible that everyone will just say, oh, Disney has all these big IPs they're worth going for. or
But
HBO, people sign into HBO because they want Game of Thrones and other stuff. Okay, are these destination shows, or are all of our media consumption in the future going to be more a la carte? Like, okay, I'm going to wait for it to end. I'm going to sign up for 1 month and I'm going to binge watch like 3 shows over the course of a month and then shut it off. Because that's the flip side to streaming service. It lets you binge. If you're going to binge, is it something you need to keep right up with? I mean, I don't think really Disney is going to have something as compelling as Game of Thrones, where to keep up with the cultural conversation, everybody is going to have to watch the latest episode right away.
Mm-hmm. All right. So speaking of things that are
sorry, I went off again, didn't I?
No, that is totally cool, and I encourage that on a Video Game Crosslog. It's all about the spinning off on the tangents. But speaking of destination shows, so yeah, Game of Thrones is definitely one. And on Netflix, you also have Stranger Things, which, just as a quick aside, it was recently renewed for a 3rd season, because of course it was renewed for a 3rd season.
That's not a surprise. No,
that's not a surprise to anyone. But one thing I fear for it, and as we're talking about Game of Thrones, one thing I'm liking about Game of Thrones in particular, and I will confess I'm a filthy casual that did not read the books, so I'm just going along with what the show is showing me. But being that it is a book series and it does have a planned end, and the show also has a planned end, all of the storylines and story arcs are wrapping up appropriately. This does not happen in many TV series because they like to ride it out and see how long they can keep the income flowing in, as in like The Shield or Sons of Anarchy, or I watched Dexter over Netflix, and towards the end they just seem to, we're going to keep these different story arcs emerging so we can keep on adding content indefinitely in the future, and they started having some really weird random story arcs coming out. I really hope that doesn't happen with Stranger Things, and it may be better suited to end on season 3. What's your thought on that statement?
Well, I mean, just looking at what we have so far, like season 2 wasn't as strong as season 1, but it was still good. It was still good storytelling, It depends on what ideas they have, season 1, if it was completely standalone and there was never season 2, it'd be fine. If season 2 didn't lead to a season 3, that'd be fine. I mean, both of them kind of ended with sequel hooks.
Yep.
But the stories they tell in a season are self-contained enough, at least, from the sample size of 2, that I can take it as it is. And if they end, I'm good. If they continue, I'm good. And I'm also someone, just my own point of view when consuming media, I don't look at a sequel or a continuation of a story if it's subpar to have retroactively reduce the quality of what came before it. So if they get sequelitis and they go up to a season 6 and everything's gotten really formulaic, like, well, season 1 was still really good. It's a bit similar to 24. I think the first season of 24 was amazing.
Oh, absolutely.
And I haven't watched all of the subsequent seasons, but it kind of went downhill. It's like, okay, this is happening. Okay. And from my perspective, there was a lot less creativity and ingenuity in the storytelling in 24 and subsequent seasons. But if you watch season 1, it was still very interesting and it stands up. Does season 5 not being as good as season 1 make season 1 less good? No,
absolutely not.
So if they keep going, let the kids, let the AV club have all the adventures they want between now and when the show becomes unprofitable.
Okay.
I had to throw a Simpsons reference.
That's fine. All right, we were going to be pushing ahead a little bit. We have some listener questions. So, first question. And we'll just get this one out of the way really quick. This is coming from Judge Greg at Judge Greg is Law. Why doesn't QA simply test exhaustively and fix all the bugs in video games?
Yeah, Greg is only asking that to irritate me because the same question irritates him. Well, I already answered part of this. QA isn't the one who fixes it.
Yeah.
Also, the fact of the matter is, no software beyond trivial complexity, and even some software of trivial complexity, is going to be free of bugs. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
like the logic gets complex enough that there's going to be something wrong somewhere.
Okay.
So you're never going to get completely clear. And
I encourage everyone.
Maybe your engineers aren't able to fix it either. So.
Right. I encourage everyone to take an introduction to coding class. Just that, like a free online, be it through a MOOC or something like that. Just learn just a little bit about writing code and see how difficult it is just to write a simple like calculator code in like the most basic language. It is easy to see where everything can go wrong as soon as you start adding anything remotely complex. So thanks, Greg, for that question. Moving on. The Monster Closet at the Monster Closet PC. How do devs decide what can be fixed pre and post launch? And I'm going to assume that's more of a prioritization issue. What do you think?
Yeah. Some of it's not necessarily what can be fixed, because if it can or can't be fixed, I mean, that's, launch is kind of, that's irrespective of launch. But yeah, in terms of prioritization, the stuff that is to be fixed before launch is all of your very critical stuff, your mission critical things. Aesthetics generally would not raise to that level, and some crashes aren't either if they're odd enough. But you want crashes, anything destructive, and these prioritizations are also going to vary based on your team or your project, what you're targeting towards. But you don't want it. There's also legal stuff. Anything that would violate the law, that has to be fixed. Otherwise, you're creating exposure for your company, and that's just no good.
Yeah, let's take care of the legal.
Anything that deals with personally identifiable information or money, financial transactions, any of that, no, that has to be fixed. Yep. Because not only is that putting your customers at risk, that is screwing with your revenue stream. You do not mess with the money. Rule number 1, do not mess with the money. Then there's some stickier stuff like, okay, is it a network thing? Okay, well, what is your upper end for expected traffic? Or are you having some bandwidth issues, load issues? Okay, well, if you're having a load issue, what is the level at which you're starting to see problems? What is the severity of the problems? Are you going to a full worldwide launch? Are you doing a limited beta test? Okay, well, if you're doing a limited beta test, depending on how you're presenting it to people, maybe just leave the problem there and get a bunch of load on it to see just how bad it can be in a live environment. Sure, there's simulations that you can run, but sometimes live traffic is going to behave differently because it's coming from all different IP addresses. You're going to have different pings and everything that you have to adjust for, and packet loss and blah, blah, blah.
And that's why during some beta tests, you'll actually see like the community manager say, all right, everyone log in at this time so we can stress test the system.
Yeah. So all of that said, the really short answer is going to be prioritization based on how impactful it's going to be for the user, given the expectations at this stage.
There you go.
That's the short version.
We also have...
That's also up to the producer, really, for the most part.
Oh.
Everyone has a conversation, but you just kind of get together, have a conversation. Maybe QA has to make sure that, no, this thing really is that impactful, and we need to increase the priority because people don't quite understand the scope and context of an issue, but that's why you have a conversation. And then out of that, you have a game plan and you triage stuff and off you go. And hopefully everything's good.
All right. So coming from Osbones83, what was your favorite game from 2017 and what are you looking forward to in 2018? So for me, I've had kind of this issue by the name of Jacob. And my gaming time has been severely limited this past year because I chose to be a dad and actually try to maintain a healthy household. So, my game of 2017, I don't want to just default over to Destiny 2. Excuse me, Destiny 2, even though that's pretty high up there. Aside from that obvious one, my gaming has been pretty limited this year, so I might have to go with. No, I'm sticking with Destiny 2.
Yeah,
Sticking with Destiny
that's
2.
fair.
What about you? What's your game of 2017 so far?
The one that I have played the most, and probably one that I will have the most time in that came out this year, would be Tekken 7, because I'm a big Tekken fan.
Nice.
But in terms of actual quality and impact and stuff that I think is artistically significant, I would say Hellblade.
That is one I really
that
want
has
to play.
a lot. Yeah, it's worth checking out for a number of levels. I appreciate games that try to poke at the borders of what video games can be as an art form,
Mm-hmm.
and what they can do to tell a story in a unique way. And actually, we have a bit of a, I suppose you could call it a bit of a sub-series, a recurring topic on Behind the Line Radio, where we kind of explore like the differences between games and movies and other forms of storytelling.
Very cool.
We just had one recently about mental illness, and we talked a bit about Hellblade.
Nice.
Within that. So that's my answers.
And so what are you looking forward to in 2018?
Oddly enough, I'm going to have to say that I don't really have anything that's caught my eye right now. So,
okay.
I mean,
see what happens.
Rarely do I really look forward to stuff. Stuff that I've really looked forward to is stuff like The Last Guardian, Killer 7 back in the day, just because that was so weird. The Tekken, because I'm a huge Tekken fan, but you know, and unless something like really catches my eye, I'm like, okay, neat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something I would say I am really looking forward to this.
Isn't there a new character coming to Tekken?
Geese Howard just got released, and there's Noctis from Final Fantasy 15 will be coming.
Yeah, because I just saw like, oh, Noctis doesn't really fit in a fighting game scheme or in the Tekken. And I'm thinking to myself, when I used to play Tekken, there was that little tiny dinosaur guy.
Gone. And Dr. Boskanovich, the old man who can't stand up all the way. And this is also a game. This is also a game that has a fighting kangaroo.
Right. So Noctis will fit just fine, people.
Yeah.
He'll be okay.
Don't take Tekken that seriously. The creators don't. It's fine. Right. It's fine.
Yeah, so as far as for me, for 2018, I am new to the PlayStation side. I'm a recent convert over from Xbox over to PlayStation. So I've been kind of backtracking on a bunch of PlayStation exclusives when I first got my PS4. So I've actually gone back and played, what was it? Infamous Second Son I got to play, and also The Last Guardian I picked up for fairly cheap. So I'm all about trying to find whatever PS exclusive I can get my hand on and kind of work some time into, just because I've been missing out on all these really cool and interesting game series. So what I'm looking forward to is the new God of War, where they take him into the Nordic mythology. I have not played a God of War game. They look brutal and fun, and this one in particular just looks badass. And I can't think of a better place for Kratos to go other than the land of the Vikings. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Oh, I'm going to amend my answer a little bit. A game that I am looking forward to, although I don't know if this is ever going to happen or if it's just weird vaporware. And if it does come out, it's probably not even going to come out in 2018. But there's this Francis Ford Coppola is actually associated with this to some extent, but an Apocalypse Now game.
Ooh.
and they like had a Kickstarter that didn't get its funding. They said, okay, we're going to stop this and we're going to try to do something else. I don't know if development is actually continuing. They have some names with some weight associated with it, but maybe if they're just like, oh yeah, I'll chip in something, or if they're like, I don't know. But the initial stuff sounds like it would be, like I said, an interesting expansion of what video games as a medium could do with storytelling and generating feelings in the player and so forth. So that's something I'm curious to see where it goes, if anything ever actually happens with it.
Yeah. And this would be like an entire, you said it's a running theme where you have a theme going on behind the lines. As a different storytelling platform and medium, I just completed last night, actually, Tales from the Borderlands. And this is my first full playthrough of a Telltale game, as far as these like choose your own adventure episodic things. And it was amazing. I am thoroughly impressed with how much of a quality story that this game was able to play. And I can definitely see where some of your decisions may or may not really matter, but you get to choose kind of like how these interactions go, because I know you need to kind of split off when certain decisions are made, but you still need to bring it back around so that the story as a full arc can continue. But like I said, that's a whole nother different conversation. So yeah, Apocalypse Now as a game, that would be, I need to look that up. Yeah, I'll be looking that up later. All right, last listener question from Aaron Sturdivant. And Aaron, thank you so much for hanging out with me at the Saratoga Comic-Con. He's a personal friend of mine, and he was able to hang out with me at my table during a Comic-Con not too long ago for both full days. And he asked the question, if you could only play one video game for the next 5 years, what would it be? And I'm just going to default right back to Destiny at this point. My video gaming life has been revolving around that series for the past, well, I guess it's a series now, for the past like 3 or 4 years. And just the sheer social aspect of it and the continuous expansions and whatnot. I basically now understand why PC gamers still play World of Warcraft and their other MMOs. Like, I totally get it now. And this is only like the console version of the game. So for me, it's an easy choice at this point, like given my situation. Destiny all the way. Kynetyk, what about you?
I suppose I could answer something along those lines and say City of Heroes, but City of Heroes doesn't exist anymore. But if I could pick one, I can pick one that is an MMO that doesn't exist anymore. Then I might pick that one.
Okay.
Other than that, Tekken is probably the game that I go back to the most. So,
nice.
Yeah, there would probably.
So, do you play against the computer, or do you go into online matches?
I go into online matches. I'm hardly like tournament quality, but I'm better than the computer almost entirely. So.
Okay. No, all right. Excellent.
All right. I'm sorry. One more. If I could, and it had, if we're going into fantasy stuff, WWF No Mercy on the N64 with an online mode. You can never get me off of that.
Nice. All right. It's time for the final 5 questions of this episode. These are 5 questions that range from irrelevant to irreverent. Kynetyk, here we go. First question. Coffee or tea?
Tea, green tea. If I'm going to pick from all the stuff, yeah.
You put anything in there, or just drink it straight up?
I would just drink it like it. It's not something that I drink on my own, like at home. But if I'm going to pick from stuff from, say, while I'm out at a restaurant, if I'm going to say my favorite way to consume coffee or tea, it would be like green tea while getting sushi.
There you go. Oh, you classy. All right. Second question. We know you're a gamer. Do you play any tabletop games?
Oh, absolutely. Love the like Rio Grande games, Dungeons and Dragons. It's actually pretty neat with Stranger Things kind of reviving a whole bunch of interest in Dungeons and Dragons, and
Oh, I know.
all kinds of stuff around these days. You don't even have to be in the same room with people. You can use like Roll20.net to play with people remotely. And all kinds of other stuff like that. I actually have a couple of campaigns that we play through Roll20, so that's awesome.
Nice. Very nice.
One of my favorite board tabletop games is Alan R. Moon's Union Pacific. I love Power Grid. I've played a game called Formula Day, which is like a car racing game that at one place where I worked, we actually ran a season of these races. So,
oh wow!
I mean, and you can get different boards that are different race tracks and so forth. Yeah, I like tabletop games.
Send me a link on that one. That sounds wild. Send me a link on that.
Formula Day? Sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, final 3 questions in here. And since your name is Kynetyk, I decided to go with a theme of the Force. So, since Kynetyk is the energy of motion, we're gonna stick with a little Force type thing for these next 3 questions.
Sure.
So, for the first of this final trio, question number 3: if you were to use the Force, as in Star Wars mythology, would you be of the light or the dark? If you're taking this long, I'm going to assume dark, and you're just ashamed to say it.
Well, the thing is, like I said earlier, I try to look at things. I tend to look at things at a bit different angle, and I kind of like the idea of what the gray Jedi or something that try to balance something or whatever. But that's kind of just, power fantasy kind of
okay
jerkiness. No, in actual practicality, I would hope that if given that ability, I would be respectful enough of other people that I wouldn't use the abilities to like intrude on privacy and stuff, which would put me on the light side. What I would hope, though, is that I would have the ability, something that I've always wanted to be able to do is something I refer to as the static shock of epiphany, where if you see someone doing something stupid, you would able to give them just a mild discomfort, like a static shock, and at the same time inject into them the perspective of to let them understand why what they were doing was wrong or stupid. And I don't know if that would be a light or dark ability if that were something that you could do with the Force.
All right. Question number 4. Do you have any, to your knowledge, a gaming moment of blatant overkill?
Yes, although primarily it's against the computer. One that comes to mind, there's a Flash game called Dice Wars. It's a little bit like Risk, but you can take over like all of these spots on the map, and I'll do stuff where I will get everything down. There's only one opponent left. It's only on one tile, and I've basically just built up the rest of the world, the rest of the map, and just letting it try to break out over and over again. It's a bit like the Gul Dukat from Deep Space Nine. True victory isn't just defeating them; it's making them recognize they were wrong to ever have opposed you in the first place.
Fantastic. I had this one in particular moment. A few years back, I was playing Magic the Gathering on my Xbox, playing against the computer, and I had this life and death cycle deck. So it was white and black. And I had in it these, I don't remember the name of the artifact. I'm such a terrible Magic player. But as I gained life, my opponent would lose life. So it's kind of like a lifesteal themed deck. And so as I gain life, through the use of this artifact, my opponent would lose life. So if I, did a life leech with like a 1/1 character and I was able to get through, they would lose 1 life from the attack. I would gain 1 life because of the life link ability, and then because of the artifact, they would lose an additional point of life. So that pissed the hell out of my brother when I used to play him with that deck. Yeah. But there's just one instance where I had multiple of that artifact on the table. I was down to like 4 life, and there's this legendary angel that when she comes into play, if you're below 20 life, you automatically get ramped back up to your full health. So in one turn, I did 16 damage to my opponent multiple times because I had multiple of that artifact on the table, and it triggered for each one of those artifacts.
Yeah.
I'm just barely squeaking through.
And that goes back to just a QA mentality, because in a video game, you can do some good limit testing. Like, okay, how hard can I hit? If I can hit hard enough, is it going to make the damage roll over? Stuff like that. Talking about Magic, play the computer version with my wife. We were playing a game of Two-Headed Giant against the computer, and we had a very, very commanding position, and we were kind of just running up the score. And just we had like dozens of creatures out that were giving each other +1 tokens. Like, how much damage can we do in one shot?
Right.
It's like we did like 300 damage.
Just because. All right. Last question. And again, this is all about force and motion. So question number 5. What is the terminal air velocity of an unladen swallow?
What do you mean? An African or a European swallow?
I don't know. Ah! Fantastic. And that is all the time we have for this episode. Time for end of show plugs. You can follow me, Anthony Rossi, on Twitter, Instagram, and PSN at Hypersyntax. That's HYP3RSINT4X. Or you can follow the podcast directly, either on Twitter at VGXTPod or on Facebook at facebook.com/videogamecrosstalk. I've also started blogging a little bit. I got another couple posts up there on the website of videogamecrosstalk.com. As for my guest, Kynetyk, where can our beautiful listeners follow you around?
Well, I'm on Enthusiacs, so you can see everything there. We're on, Podbean for all of our podcasts. That's Behind the Line Radio and Hero Talk and Point Streak. We also have YouTube channel, Enthusiacs. You can see Axelon's Let's Plays there and a few other things, and my really goofy hobby of making WWE 2K17 videos of the Enthusiacs wrestling each other. Enthusiacs Wrestle Gaming Championship. I
have seen a couple of those videos. They are entertaining.
I'm glad someone found them entertaining. You can follow Enthusiacs on Twitter at Enthusiacs. It's Enthusiacs everywhere, and you can follow me on Twitter at Kynetyk Knows, KYNETYK KNOWS.
All right. And finally, if you are a gamer or know a gamer that wants to talk some tech and science news, let me know. Do you know of some tech news that you'd like to hear discussed? Do you have any other general questions you'd like to hear answered on the show? Send an email to videogamecrosstalk@gmail.com and give me the deets of what's going down. Please don't forget to like, review, subscribe, and share this podcast all over your social media accounts, and we can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, and most other podcast services. One last time, thank you for hanging out with us, and Kynetyk, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And in the words of Tony Robbins, setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. All right, so we have Andrew WK's cover art reveal. I still want to talk about it because it's a really cool story, but I'm not sure if that fits in with gaming and geekery or... screw it, we'll talk about it now.
Why not?
It's true.
Sorry, I can keep going.
Oh, no worries.
I can go on and on about stuff.
Oh, no, my last podcast was like 2 hours. I was like, oh my God.
I saw you had all these topics you wanted to hit. It's like, oh, this is going to go long, isn't it?
Again, talking on the use of force, and we're going to go into excessive use of force in this question. Do you have any notable gaming moments, any moments of blatant gaming overkill? Or excuse, hold on.